So I think we should dive right in. The way I normally run these conversations is that I don't like to go into a full intro about who you are and your bio. I think that's going to come out through the conversation, and you're easy to find on LinkedIn and your profile's there. What I'd like to start with as a way of opening is what do you do? Maybe give me a breakdown of where your business is today. What would you say that you do and what your business does?
So the simple thing out there is I'm a business coach and consultant for entrepreneurs, creatives, and the aspiring. However, I am a serial entrepreneur. And so what I do is a lot of different things. Where I make most of my money is language education and language training. I have a company called Rocha Languages here in Cambridge, which is a language institute education company. Then another company I own is called Blue Rock International. I'm a partner with 3 other people, and we import, export different things out there. But my passion is people, and coaching allows me to share my passion of business, my experience, but also able to connect with people on sort of a very personal level as they grow their businesses or lean in on a side hustle and go all in. So that's kind of what right now.
I'm excited to follow up on a few of those different activities.
There's a lot.
Let's go into another question I typically do ask people is, when would you say that you first self-identified as an entrepreneur? And even what does that word mean to you? It sounds like it was pretty early on. But I'm interested to see when that word resonated for you.
Yeah. So I have always, I worked through college and actually worked since I was 15. I was worked at the local bank. I weaseled my way into banking at 15 through an internship that then turned into an actual job for 7 years. So every summer, every holiday, I actually had a job at the bank as a teller. And we joke around till this day, some of the current executive vice presidents of the bank, I trained at 15, 16, 17 is not like no joke. And so now they're board members of the bank, and I've always worked. And so part of it was out of necessity. I come from a very humble family in rural Texas, grew out of extreme poverty, and work was part of the necessity. And my father was an entrepreneur. We didn't realize this until we sort of had a family meeting that we come from a family of creatives and entrepreneurs. Most of my nieces and nephews own their own business in one way, form, or fashion, and has to do with sort of, being a creative, an artist, a hairstylist, things like that. And so going into college, I needed to make money, and I speak Spanish. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of, no offense to anybody out there, but there's a lot of white people in Cambridge who want their children to be bilingual and ethnic, of some, have some sort of exposure. And I literally started with like one client. Everybody at Harvard at the time where I went to college was able to code in HTML and create websites. So I started with one simple website called bostonspanish.com, and got one client and then 2 clients. And I said, and so how much can I charge these people to teach them uno, dos, tres? And in college, I got up to $100 an hour. Just kind of increasing the price as I went on. And I realized, hey, I'm actually pretty good at teaching, but also my clientele are busy professionals who want efficiency, but also progress. And so that's sort of kind of like my mission in life, whether it is selling stuff, working on language education, consulting, or even coaching. It's sort of like, I think all of us want those things. We want to be efficient. We want to see performance. We want to, get the value of what we're paying for, right? Get it out of it. And so I've always run my life in my business sort of creating processes and protocols for efficiency, but also value on an ongoing basis.
So starting out, you were teaching the lessons yourself. So you were using tools to schedule and transactions, but you were the one actually teaching.
I was.
How did you scale that?
So
you're not scalable as a person, typically.
100%. And that's a big, so tip number 1 in business, I know having your name out there as a business or as a company is super attractive to a lot of people and sexy, and narcissistically and egotistically is a great thing to do, right? You want to be the famous Warren Buffett. He is only one person. He has a powerful team behind him, but not all of us can attain that, right? And so from a branding perspective, I always tell entrepreneurs, are you sure you want to use your name? Are you sure? And I've only seen one company do this successfully. And I'll get back to the question, is a woman who in New York had personal trainers, and I think her name was Vicky. So she hired only women, and she said, your name is now Vicky. And so because people wanted to work with Vicky, that was the brand, right? So what I did, it wasn't scalable at the time, but I had the time, so I increased my time. And at the time, as I kind of graduated from college, I had loyal clientele. I was doing pretty good at it. I then got my now ex-girlfriend, then girlfriend, to start working in the business. She then recruited her cousin, who then started working in the business. And then their best friend started working in the business. And I was like, okay, how can I then replicate myself? These were fantastic women who were Harvard educated, fully bilingual, natural teachers, but that's not what we wanted to do with our life. We didn't want to become teachers and as a profession. We just did it because it was a passion to share languages and meet people. And then I started creating a system so that it was called the Rolla method. My company's called Rolla Languages. It was called the Rolla method. And it is a progressive way of teaching languages, but we can apply it to different things, right? So the general idea is that immersion generally doesn't work for adults because we have been corrupted by what I call adult education, right? So when somebody works for you, you generally tell them what to do, and they're used to being told what to do. You're giving them assignments, you're giving them parameters, right? So then all of a sudden we want them to be immersive, and they don't no longer know what that means. They can't play like a kid. They can't sing songs. They don't want to sing songs. And but they're used to being told what to do. So the method is militaristic in style. And we do have immersive styles as well, but it's sort of like, okay, if you're here for 1 hour, truly 1 hour, what can I brainwash you to learn and understand and then use on a regular basis and an ongoing basis? Now, that can be applied to math and science and business protocols, right? So generally as a consultant, we probably go into a company, they pay us a lot of money and we leave, and 90% of those people then don't use what we've taught them to do. So you go back the next year and you're like, oh my gosh, we had a system in place. And part of it comes down to the repetition and recall of and the purpose of that, right?
So I do want to come back and clarify. So when you had the business, you were solo, you had a partner and you started hiring people, you were throwing more people doing the activity, increasing your cash flow. And then you design the structure, systems, and processes to allow you to scale. Any insights? Like, 'cause that's something a lot of people talk about doing, but it's much harder than it sounds than you could explain it in hindsight.
Yes.
Because you're essentially building the ship while sailing. And
I recommend don't do that. that's yeah.
So on that, so a lot of people say, oh, don't do that in hindsight, but looking back, what would you have told yourself at the beginning that could have avoided that path? Because I think that it's almost always necessary to a certain degree.
Right. So I think at some point I should have gotten all of those teachers all at the same time for 2 weeks. And we should have then really just flushed out every single thing that we were working on, type of thing. And to your question about how the practicality of that, in the moment, part of it's survival. Part of it is you're paying your bill, right? You're increasing your operation, your operational costs. Part of it is then you need to then move on to the next client and recruiting and marketing, right? And so I always say two things when I start working with clients as a coach is like, do you actually need to launch this podcast today, or can you really batch 20 episodes so that then you put it on cruise control and you've already understood that, your weaknesses and strengths and the SWOT and all opportunities, all those things. So looking back at it, I made two big mistakes. One was I didn't pause and regroup. And I did that later in life. I did that year 5. I closed everyone. I stopped everything for a few weeks. I was like, no, we need to reinvest because now we're getting hundreds of clients, not just tens. and now they're demanding stuff. And my previous clients were loyal to me, so if when there was a problem, they'd call me. Now, as you're growing, the boss is removed, my personality is removed, and then it's sort of like now we're just a cold corporation, not the human-sized company that we've been trying to be. So there's that cultural thing that we're trying to.
So you mentioned 5 years. Was that do you think that was an impact of how long you've been in operation, or to a size you got to at that point?
It was a size. Yep, I had hit. We had been consistently hitting over 100 clients per month, and I was like, okay, now we need to think about what this actually is and looks like, and they expect. And then, so that was the first mistake, was sort of not pausing sooner rather than later. The second one is I bootstrapped the business. And so I know you have conversations with entrepreneurs and small business owners and everything as well. Looking back at it, I know now that people would have given me money. I just never asked. Whether it's like, your friends and family around, whether it's, I didn't even go to the bank and say, this is what I'm doing. This is my proposal. Can you give me a loan? And that was just the second biggest mistake. And I think, we would have been further along a lot quicker than we were, because we didn't have the finances or the war chest we needed to fend off competition, right? Or to invest in innovation.
So I'd like to double click on that, because we're exactly in that position, or I am personally. So
Yep.
Part of these podcasts for me is a selfish way to explore my own inadequacies and decisions. So, so we are bootstrapping
Yep.
our business growth, but I went the other route and I raised money in my last company. Right. And I've seen lots of advice, and it happens like if you get money at the beginning and you're following the plan, not feeling the day-to-day pinch of cash flow and payroll. Was I always making the smartest decisions with the right outcomes? So I always struggle with if I had been given more money, would I have spent it correctly? Is there a necessity of having that pinch or that control or that discipline? So we're hampered by our own bootstrapping now.
Yep. And
to take on more clients would mean we're referring to it as investing ahead of the curve.
Yep.
To build people capacity to take on more clients.
Correct.
So we're in the midst of that decision. I'm really struggling with it.
Now I understand. And so in my opinion, I made the worst decisions of my life when I didn't have money. And so because you're trying to dig out of the hole, and what you end up doing is you start digging the hole more, right? And so I would say, again, I don't know your business completely. Mm-hmm. I would say having a cushion to invest ahead of the curve, right? Yeah. If you have that option, then, there's so many other types of money out there now that I didn't even know about back then. I didn't even know what a line of credit was. So they give you a paper that says you have access to this money. What? like what is that? I was young and stupid. Yeah. And so I think there's other ways for you to then sort of have it ready when you need it to deploy, right?
Yeah. Half of my fears are I probably know too much and I've seen too much. Now I don't have the naivete that I probably should have. Yep. I'm curious, going back to, because I love your evolution of structure and investment and systems, and especially your own methodology. I'm interested about when. So my assumption is at some point you either saw the shiny object or you got bored. But what was the catalyst for you going serial with your entrepreneurship activities?
Yeah, so part of it is so my partner tells me that I need to be more focused, and I know that I'm an unfocused person. So my strategy with a couple of therapists, was to be unfocused in a very focused way. Now that sounds very convoluted, but what that means is that when I'm working on the language education business, any seed that I plant has related to that business, right? Whether it's children education, whether it's French or Portuguese or Mandarin, whether it's going into businesses, and the gamut is huge, right? And so if I can apply that method, that Rolla method, into those different things, then that's awesome, right? That's I'm unfocused, but I'm kind of the visionary. Now, the vision got to a point where I have a staff of 7 employees and 24 contractors who now run the business. And about 4 or 5 years ago, the opportunity came about by accident for me to launch part of the business in China, and with a Chinese, business to business agreement, which would take me away from the company and to China on a regular basis. And that was a blessing in disguise. The roller coaster in China was crazy, and we can have a whole podcast about a foreigner arriving in China and working and doing business in China. But it was a blessing because it removed me from the company. And as the current director of my company, Erica, who runs it operationally on a day-to-day basis for me, what she said was, Ed, you've planted enough seeds. Turn it over to the team and let them grow. Right. So that was that unfocused in a focused way. Then I focused on another part of the business, which was our international business. And so then now, right, I'm a coach. So then the question is, what does all this language training have to do with coaching? The business is growing. It's thriving. There is a process and protocols. We have material. We have workbooks. And so now I need to, the team that I've built, somebody asked me this morning, can you trust your team to run the business without you? And I said, absolutely. And he goes, 90% of the time I ask that, they're like, no, but yes, I can. And so that's then allowed me during COVID to sort of lean in on, the next phase of my life is sort of business coaching, this knowledge that I have or this experience that I have, and pass it on to the youth of, right? We're not that old, but to other people who are trying to give it a go.
So when did you start seeing coaching as its own business?
So I've always given free, unsolicited advice to all my friends and colleagues and acquaintances, if that makes sense. And I'm the guy they call, like, oh, I want to start a business or I have a business idea. Like literally for the last, 15, 20 years, it's like, call Ed. I need to call it. I need to talk to Ed. And so at the beginning, when we went in lockdown and COVID, all this uncertainty and scary thing, and my husband's a frontline worker, so we were kind of nervous about what that meant. Like every night I would be like, salute him and say, good luck, because we didn't know what that meant going into the hospital with COVID patients and stuff like that. I realized that I wanted to help people, like everybody. Like, what do we do if we're locked in the house? And so I started a goal setting group for free with friends and colleagues. So there's about 15 of us who were scared shitless during COVID. We were in our boxes, in our bubbles, in our houses, and trying to work, but distracted because we're watching the news, and we're all of us are poorer. We don't know what that means. We're trying to give all those things that happen that we all can relate to now, right? So out of that, I was like, okay, how can I, as a facilitator of this group that I selfishly started for myself because I was probably the most scared, but I also wanted to be productive and have structure because that's what I need. How can I be a great facilitator for them on an ongoing basis? And so one of my friends, a former actually language client of mine who is a coach, saw me post something about this goal setting group and goes, Ed, like, are you a coach? And I'm like, no. She's like, well, you probably should be. And she invited me to this I call her the queen coach of all coaches. She's a white-haired woman in Arizona that all the coaches about. I forget her name. I have her, And so the queen coach accepted me into her Facebook group, and I'm super excited. I was like, maybe this could be. I've toyed around with consulting, right? And I've been a consultant, but that just is a little bit more. I think you guys do a lot of consulting as well. It's a little bit more not as personal. Mm-hmm. as the coaching part of like working with somebody, right? You're working with teams, you're working on an organization, but I want to work with you, right? I want to get to know you, Levi, and who are you and what are your problems and what are your issues? And let's, what makes you a great boss or a horrible boss? What makes you a great entrepreneur and a horrible entrepreneur, right? Those things actually make me exciting, but also back to the language company, there are protocols and procedures and patterns, right? That was the other thing I discovered in language training is the patterns that we need to identify to help somebody stay motivated for languages, right? And so with coaching, like I can identify your pattern within like 30 seconds. I mean, oh, you like to waste money, or oh, yep, you're scared, and so it's been awesome because, getting to get into people's heads a little bit and helping them discover and guide them is awesome.
So because you have a lot of experience in building systems and packaging services, did you kind of blue sky exactly how your operation's going to work? Or did you take on like a model from an existing style?
Yeah, so for the language company, it grew organically into my personality type of thing, right? Right, that process and protocols, right? We have systems in place. I was blessed, I've also as a leader understand now what I need to make me thrive and to make me successful as a business person, CEO, entrepreneur, etc. And so I generally don't hire people with my personality because that would be a lot. And you're probably getting overwhelmed if you're watching because I have a lot of energy. So I generally tend to get people who are, one, tell me no and don't agree with me and challenge me, and two, who are generally more detail oriented and operational focused, right? Because those are my weaknesses. And
so many similarities.
Yeah, and but some people, they want to be, they hire people like themselves because they're like, oh no, I need a second me. And in reality, I'm like, no, you don't need a second you. You might think you do. You need a person who can represent you, but slightly in a different way because they're not you type of thing. For the morning goals, like immediately when I launched it, I'm like, I need a team. And I knew what I was looking for. I was looking for overeducated, smart people who did not need to baby me, but who I could sort of parse out operations on one side and marketing and content, digital marketing, content development on the other side. And lo and behold, I found two of the most amazing colleagues ever. One is a nomad. He travels in his van around America, which is, I'm super jealous. And then the other one is a military wife who runs her own business. And we all have it was like sort of the stars were aligned and we came together and we've been doing some pretty awesome stuff.
So you've done lots of things already.
Yeah.
Are you guided by a longer term goal, or how would you picture your future aspirations?
Sure. So that's a great question that I've thought about. So part of it is reality, right? So I am married to a gentleman who's older than I am. He's going to hit retirement about 12 to 13 years before I will, age-wise. Obviously, we all want to retire early, so that's maybe it's a motivation. But also, there's a reality of this planning and where do we want to be financially? Where do we want to be physically? When that happens, what am I going to be working 40, 60 hours a week when he's completely retired, right? And so there's that reality part of it. From a personal perspective, which is then professional, is that I have come to terms. So I judge my business opportunities off of 3 words, and I challenge everybody to do this. So I had a brother who passed away in 2008, and he would never reached his potential because he lived in fear and all kinds of things. And so after that, as I was in deep depression and sort of reflecting on my life, I said, okay, what do I want? Right. And so, of course, the easy answer is you want a partner, you want kids, and you want stability, whatever that means. Right. That's the easy answer because that's what we're trained in a society to think about. And for me, I said, nope, anything I do, I want to meet people. So I want to be able to meet people. 2, I speak 4.5 languages. I want to, use my languages, use the travel, the culture, all that stuff. And then 3, so it's travel, travel, using my languages and meeting people. So with those 3 words, I now judge any business opportunity, consulting opportunity. And if I can check off 2.5 of those boxes, I then firmly believe that then money will come my way, that I will be successful financially, right? The problem that I see a lot of people doing is I need to make $150,000 a year, right? That's not fun, right? Because then there's pressure and bills and deadlines and wives and husbands nagging at you, and that's what we do. That's what we do as a society, generally in this capitalist society that we live in. But take of it, what makes you happy, and then from that passion and that happiness, can you then make money? And the answer is generally, most of the time, absolutely 100%.
So, because I often talk to people, it's like I can't define success without understanding what your goals are, what your future, what your priorities are. Like success is not more for more sake, for sure. Right. I'm curious about that. So to clarify, you're talking about, every person should have 3 guiding words for them, not necessarily any specific word, but you need to bring down all your aspirations to something clearer or allow you to use as a filter for decision making and goal setting.
Yeah.
Do you recommend any, did you get that from somebody else or is it from your own? And do you have any recommended exercise of that kind of prioritization?
Sure. No, actually, I sort of kind of thought about it all by myself. Well, part of it is from the business perspective, right? What is your mission? I mean, maybe that was sort of the trigger of like, what is your mission in life, Levi? Right. And generally most of us start in the wrong place. And so I see this on like 95% of entrepreneurs. I'm like, why are you in business? And they always tell me, I want to change the world, or I want to make it better for my children, whatever. Bullshit. You're in business because you want to make money, right? That if you don't start from that place of truth, then you should go become a volunteer or start a nonprofit and go do other things, right? And so part of it is like, what is your mission? And so my mission is myself and my partner, period, right? And that's okay. It sounds very selfish. But that's okay, because those are the things that make me happy. And I want us to travel. I want us to meet people because we're both social people. And I want us to explore the world through languages and cultures and sort of go deep dives and not do the touristy thing, right? Not do the bus tour, right? But go see our friends in France and Italy and Argentina, which we've been able to do, pre-COVID, and looking forward to doing that, right? And so those things make us happy. And guess what? Every time I do those things, business opportunities pop up, consulting opportunities pop up, referrals, pop up, and that's sort of being authentic, right, to yourself. And so the exercise that everybody should do who's listening or watching this is think about yourself, be a little bit selfish for yourself and your family, and think about 3 things that you want for your family that are slightly abstract. What will make you guys happy? Is it time, right? Some people it's time. They don't have enough time to spend with their loved ones. For some people it's, less stress, right? So ask yourself, okay, does this consulting deal bring me stress? Right? If it does, and say no, because there are fun consulting gigs out there, right? And as we know, we don't always get the fun ones, but there are.
So it's interesting to explore. So there's a lot of similarity. On a small tangent, I was a linguistics and language major, and traveled in language. I was a chef by trade for 10 years. It's similarities there. But back to the conversation around, the purpose of why you start a business. Yeah. Because I focus a lot. So my first business was the impetus or the reasons were all around problem solving and frustration that nobody was figuring out something that seemed obvious. Right. And so there was a little bit of stubbornness. And I now, looking back in hindsight, we even called it a social enterprise. It was there. It wasn't really articulated that it was there for me to make money. But we learned probably too late that if I looked deeper and went through the exercise of why, a lot of my longer term goals, I needed wealth to do it. And so for example, like I really want to be somebody who can invest in businesses. Right. I want to be somebody who can invest time in entrepreneurs. I want to be somebody who, because there's some businesses that I think will make us a better community place to live in, but you need money to do that. So I don't know if I can get myself to say that I'm money oriented first, because I see that as a personal weakness. I'm always having to remind myself of the money and margin side. Yep. So the mantra I have that is guided me for 7 or 8 years now is there's no mission without margin, to make sure that all the ideas, because they're all attached to money. It's just we're not using money first because there's this taboo about wanting to just be wealthy or make money. Right. So I
had a rich man once tell me, Ed, let me teach you how to make money. I know you want to save the world and you want to go back into your community, and but let me teach you how to make money, because when you volunteer 1 hour of your time, you're only giving 1 hour of your time. I can write a check for $1 million and replicate myself millions of times and have, exponential impact. And that really stuck with me because it sounded like a little selfish and like, what, we're talking about money in that way. But it stuck with me because, as I've created more wealth for myself and my family, I have been able to give back more and have been able to make investments in people that I believe in, or also have the luxury to do stuff like this, right? I don't have to be client facing 8 hours a day, right, to make money because and I'm able to do stuff like that and spread the word, if you will, right?
Yeah, no, I got similar advice about like imagine two sides of it. One is imagine if people with stronger values had more money. That, like absolutely. Maybe do it for the world.
Yes.
But the second one was imagine if, and I'm losing a thought. I'll come back to it.
No, but I like that one, the first one you said, because I am Latino, and with everything that's happening in the world right now, especially here in the United States, I think we need more diverse voices that do have money and can amplify other people's voices. And I work with people who, like myself, had a similar profile. They grew up in poverty. All of a sudden, we come out of college and we're making way more money than mom and dad ever have seen in their entire life. And then what, right? And I'm like, no, you have to keep making money. You have to keep being successful, because then you can help mom and dad, but not just mom and dad, but the community that you're in. And, you can amplify your message, and then you can do the things that you want to do. Like I have published a series of children's books dedicated to my mom and dad. And my dad was the town alcoholic, and my mom was a bipolar crazy woman. And so how awesome that they have a children's book after them, because they produced amazing kids who were successful, and all of us have 2 degrees. And now we have the time to say, you know what, you did do okay by us, right? You may not have thought about it at the moment. And this is how I'm going to honor you and your legacy and your name. And had it not been for the ability to hire an illustrator and have the time to write the stories, right? That message, and hopefully it's inspiring other people, kids and rural communities. Yeah.
Well, I remembered my point.
Yeah.
But the other side of his advice was, if you have an idea that does good things, you can inspire others to follow. If you have an idea that does good things and makes a lot of money, you'll inspire everyone. And I thought that really spun my head around. Is like, you can inspire people who are like-minded with a good idea who does good things. But if that same idea makes money, if we can come up with green energy that makes everybody filthy rich, the world will change in 6 months.
Agreed.
So I love the changing my thinking on that. There's a couple questions I do try to ask everybody. One is, looking back, since you started charting your own path, so I'm picturing when you started, your language school and you get your growing business right up until today, what would you say is your most exciting moment you've had, or moments?
There are several moments. You had asked me in our pre-interview question, like when, and then you asked it again and I didn't touch it. When did you know you were an entrepreneur? And that stuck with me when you asked me, and I've been kind of thinking, and I remembered exactly when. So I was at Joe's American Bar and Grill on Newberry Street in downtown Boston. And I have a friend who is a former roommate of mine in college who is a genius and will win like a Nobel Prize in math, and like got tenure at age 25 and 26 as a professor because he's a genius. And where he was visiting, and I remember sitting across from him, and we're talking about the language school and stuff. And I remember him saying, I'm getting chills thinking about this, him saying, oh yeah, I had a friend who called me up, and he's like, yeah. I was like, what do you do? He's like, and the friend told him, he's like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. And he goes, no, you're not. Ed is. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, he viewed me as an entrepreneur. And I was like, you're playing around, you're playing around. Ed is really an entrepreneur. He's really a business person. And that moment stuck with me and gave me some validation that from the outside, I was doing something. The second part about that, I think it's been amazing in business is when you have impact on people, real impact on people. And through the language education business, I have trained, the one that comes to mind right now is a mother who adopted 2 kids. And she promised them that on their 15th or 18th birthday, she would use all of the money she had to help them find their biological parents in Latin America, because those kids were Latin American. And she started her journey learning Spanish from zero because those were her kids, and she didn't want to have a translator between parents, these kids who, gave up these kids, and her, she wanted to be able to defend her kids in the language, in their native language they no longer spoke. And how powerful is it to be a part of these stories and allowing these people these people allow me into their lives. For the coaching business, for our 9 a.m. goal setting group, we see each other every day for 30 minutes, and we've been doing so for a year now. Our year anniversary just passed. The 12 of us who've survived and come and gone, we know about each other's personal lives way more than their partners do, because we're there and we're sharing and we're growing together. And how powerful is that to be able to be a part of these stories? And I think that's always been, and I've tried to create communities out of my businesses. And I tell all of my employees, your job is not to work for me for 25 years. This is a stepping stone to something greater. And my job is to give you as much knowledge as I possibly can. And I better be your reference to the job you're applying to next. I don't want to hear that you're leaving. I want to have the honor to talk about you in this, your growth and the learning stuff, and let me be a part of that journey. And then, you get people who stay for a very long time, and people who leave, and that's okay. But I want to empower everybody that this is our community and our family, and you'll have a home when you come back. Only once or twice have I had people I'm never going to come back, but, but yeah.
So the complement to that question, I love to hear about the impact and what resonates as success and excitement for the entrepreneurs. But we also know that no entrepreneur has it all together, and we all make mistakes all the time. So if you were to look back, charting your own path the whole time, what are some cringeworthy you look back as I just can't believe I did that? The more practical or realistic, the better.
Yeah, two things. One was, like many entrepreneurs, some of us had a job that made us a lot of money, and then we're like, I'm tired of it. I'm frustrated. I'm just gonna, the side hustle. I need to dive into the business. That's a very common entrepreneurial thing. At a very young age, I was working for a family of hedge funds. By accident, I got a promotion to director of business development and investor relations. And by accident, the boss of that company had to take a year off, mandated for whatever reason. And I got paid a lot of money at 22, 23 years old to become a director of a hedge fund. Biggest mistake was when he came back, I used that to break my contract and leave. Right. Because I was like, I don't like him, whatever. He's now a dear friend of mine. And the stupidest thing was that I should have stayed a little bit longer. And it's cringeworthy because I was making so much money and I wasn't working that hard because I was good at it, that I should have stayed a little bit longer. But, wrote it out for a little bit longer at that age. The second thing that I remember was cringeworthy was actually when I was working in China. I had the woman who brought me over, who's passed away. Her name is Helen. May she rest in peace. Wonderful woman, but our personalities were just clashy. But I'm a cultural expert. So I also understand when to use culture to your advantage and when to fake your lack of knowledge in culturally sensitive meetings. And she and I had a tumultuous year and a half. And the cringe part of it was that she picked up on it, that I knew how to use her Chinese culture and business ethics against her when it was appropriate for me. And so it's making me feel icky right now thinking about it. And I should have sort of I was there as her, yes, I mean, that was her business partner through this, B2B a thing. But it's bothered me. And so when you said that, you had asked me that question as well, I thought about sort of like, I should have gone a little bit more humbly, my approach.
A little more authentic, probably.
More authentic and not sort of, yeah. But that was but it was a great learning experience. And then, after that relationship ended and I did have another B2B contract with another education company in China, we were able to sort of start in an authentic place. And, it's been now, 5 years, and they understand me and I understand them, and they visit me here and I visit, so it's like, it should have, so I kind of, it was a learning process for my part on that first one. It was kind of cringy. But also then allowed for that second relationship to thrive.
Yeah. So I have an interesting question from the Q&A from the audience that I'd like to pull in. And you've already touched on this. So do you think that humble beginnings for anybody, and especially diverse perspectives of growing up in those situations, do you think they directly relate to people being more altruistic or have stronger values when they receive success from a conventional point of view?
Yep. It depends. And I know this, so I do nonprofit work in the Latino community nationwide here in the United States, and sit on some nonprofits and have some roles in this work. And so it depends. So there's that group that will be more altruistic, will be more giving, and will, not forget where they come from. But then there's the other group who, if you think of minority populations, we're always competing against a white man. No offense, Levi. And there's imposter syndrome and stuff. And assimilation and all those things that we're hearing and seeing now, right? And part of it is then those other people who move away from that because they need to fit into a certain profile. And I'm thinking sort of Manhattan CEOs, and I know a couple who are people of color, and I see the ones who are true to their past and true to their humble beginnings, and others who are not, and, don't roll in Spanish, we roll our R's. So don't roll your R when you talk to me, type of thing. So I see it both ways. I have always been taught to, and I'm very honest and open about my life and my history, because I think that there's a lot of people out there that can resonate with, having an alcoholic father and how that's affected us, having a mother who is bipolar and mental health issues. And we need to talk about those things, because those things are not embarrassing. Those things are things that happen on a very regular basis. I talk about, when I didn't have food and we didn't have electricity, or when people had to, drive me around town. And that's not embarrassing and shouldn't be, right? So it just depends.
Yeah. So this is an interesting segue, because I do this with all my conversations and clients and the places I travel. I'm really a big fan of learning new situations, challenges. I love seeing other people's perspectives, and I think it makes me a better problem solver. And so one area, and we can go as deep or as little in detail as possible, I'm curious about the realities and unique challenges you might be facing. Because you mentioned you started a business with a girlfriend, and you mentioned your husband who's older.
Oh, man.
So I guess it's an area where I have friends in that situation, but it's never come up in conversation, the realities as an entrepreneur. I mean, there's all kinds of realities. I totally get it. But as an entrepreneur, building and growing a business, hiring people, sales, business development, I'd love to know from your perspective any possible advantages, disadvantages, realities that you could share for anybody listening.
Yeah, it's hard. Being a gay man, is and a business person is hard. And there's, different layers of, I'm also Latino, and, I don't have a rich family that can write me a check when that happens, because that sometimes my friends are able to do that. Their biggest investors are mom and dad. And so as a gay man, there's some things that I have come up in conversation or in business dealings, etc. I no longer wear a wedding. I am married. I don't no longer wear a wedding ring, because the default is always the heteronormative, right? Oh, what does your wife do? And then that then leads into like conversations. Maybe I don't want to talk about my personal life. I should have the option of not talking about my personal life, right? If I don't want to. And you have that luxury. I'm assuming you're a straight man, but you have that luxury. People have that luxury out there. You know, there's the question of where are you from? Is race inherently racist and microaggressive, right? And so like I no longer answer that question because, you know, I'm from Texas and I'm from Boston now. And so, you know, where are you from? You look Irish. Are you Irish? Right. Right. So, you know, and so I no longer answer that question. The other part of it is, you know, I remember I was getting a big consulting contract and I was wearing my ring, and at the end of the conversation, they took me out to it was a traditional, it was a venture capital private equity group, and they were hiring me as their outsourced investor relations, but also team builder. So my job was to build their team out for them, analysts and a replacement for myself on a long-term basis as they got more money. And I remember the older gentleman of the group taking me out to the steak dinner and saying, Ed, we're super excited to have you on the team. Like, we're all, and it's gonna be great. Oh, what does your wife do? And I said, oh, well, it's not a wife, it's a husband. And he looked at me and he goes, Ed, just so you know, we wouldn't have a problem with that. And I responded and I said, well, if you did, I wouldn't be working with you. Right. And so like sort of like having to defend yourself a little bit. The cool thing here in the US, and I'm not sure in Canada, is we do have an LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce and LGBTQ certification where if your business is identified as a minority-owned business or a Latino-owned business or an LGBTQ-owned business, there is some like contractual, like government contract preferential treatment to those type of groups to try to diversify the pool of applicants for these government contracts. And so for consulting, it is beneficial to lean in on that. But also, you know, I also tell people like, you know, I am as honest and authentic about my relationship. And sometimes it has to do with my business and sometimes it doesn't, right? Like any other business. And so, you know, I try to mentor kids that, you know, in college who are struggling with their sexuality or coming out, or also, you know, kids who come from, you know, backgrounds that I came from, rural communities, very conservative places. And, you know, I always say is like, one, be patient. Two, don't negotiate your values, but give the other person some time to understand, you know, to come, you know, maybe meet you in the middle. It may not be where they should meet you, but like give them space. And then three, you know, don't overreact, because we're very reactionary, right? All of us human beings our tendencies, we react. So if you react strongly and negatively, they're going to react back strongly and negatively, right? And so, you know, like, so when you ask me, oh, you have a husband? Yeah, I have a husband. And then move on, right? Right. I'm not going to say, what? Why are you asking me this question? Because then it becomes attention and we stop the conversation, right? And my job is, you know, is to, you know, I'm a representative of various communities. We all are, you are as well. And like, we have different hats, and that's just one hat that I wear.
So I think I mentioned before, I'm a
member
of
my ex-girlfriend. She's great.
I'm a member of a lot of different like business peer groups, like my own, like similar to your group, you have a year. I'm coming up on 8 years with the same group of 11 people now, started at 16. And I found there's so I believe that the most successful entrepreneurs I know, that there's a consistent increased self-awareness and self-learning through that journey. Yeah. And what I found is that it's as important or even more important that you're not only learning about yourself, you're learning about the point of view of others. Yeah. And like I was born to be male, pale, and stale. Like I have 8 generations of dairy farmers from England behind me. Like but it's somehow I got this interest in travel, culture, language, and food. Yeah. That has blessed me with learning the point of view and experimenting and talking. So what I like about it now is, again, we're all busy people, is like this podcast or the deeper conversations of those peer groups that I have allows me to, because I don't want to be the person who's like stops the conversation because you say you have a husband.
Right.
But then how often do you get to have a conversation about learning about the perspective of somebody who has a husband? Because that's not a common conversation that you have, especially as busy and, so I guess long story short, I appreciate the chance to ask some of those questions, to highlight and double click.
Yeah. And I appreciate, you asking that question. And I think it's something I don't talk about a lot, right? So when people interview me, it's Harvard. It's, my business background, the language company or the coaching company, but also, my number one supporter is my husband. And he's just like, we're, there's not, and then we don't fit the typical roles that the stereotypes that people have. Like we're two alpha males, who have to negotiate, the cooking and cleaning, and it's not always the same.
Outsource.
You outsource, but also, as do I. I have a lot of robots in my house to kind of cook. But also, and I don't talk about that a lot, and but it is part of, my think about this, right? So I'm trying to create an authentic community and culture in my company, and my family is a part of that. And for a lot of companies and CEOs, it's not that, right? And that's not what they're trying to create, but that is what I'm trying to create. I want people to be open and honest with me, to come to me for advice, my employees, talk about their futures and their plans. Let's coach. I'll coach you through, through your next steps in your life, or give you advice or guidance like I got and received. And also my family is part of, and my family is my husband and my crazy 2 dogs, who thank God haven't barked this entire time. But also, that's a part of my story, right? And that's part of the culture that I'm creating in my company. And if I didn't talk about my husband, or if he didn't come to my events, it would be not authentic.
Yeah. And same, like we have that conversation in our companies. I want to make sure they're open to the realities of company growth. Like I don't hide things that I think traditionally most people do, and I did the first time through. The good, the bad, the ugly, the reality. So I'm excited about these conversations, and this one's been great. We're coming towards the end, and there's a dozen different tangents that I would like to ask and go to, but and maybe there's a 2.0, but I'm interested in to close out or come towards the end. I'd love to hear if there's anywhere, so 2 left. One is, are there any recommendations of books or podcasts or leaders that influenced you that you'd love to share? Because I always love getting those recommendations, because I love consuming new content and changing my perspective. And there's a lot of garbage out there. Yep. So that's one. And then second, is there anywhere we didn't take the conversation that you'd really like to finish off with?
So a couple of books that resonate with me is the 4-Hour Work Week. I will never have a 4-hour work week, but I actually took a lot of little tidbits from it. Like I hired a virtual assistant because of it. I no longer read emails as religiously as some of us who are addicted to emails do because of it. And so think about it from a it's like, when I'm not a very religious person, but when I do go to church, there is some value into the therapeutic nature of these beautiful these things. I don't necessarily always listen to the guy, but the music's great and hits you here, and the stained glass is awesome. So, so the 4-hour work week was one that sort of started this, okay, how can I become even more efficient, or how can I outsource some of these things? And there's another one that the name is escaping me, but it's basic. It's a negotiation one. And I'm going to try to think of it, find it as quick as I possibly can.
And if you send it to us, we can add it to the show notes too.
I'll send it to you guys. But basically, it's an FBI, former FBI or CIA negotiator who went up against Harvard law negotiation stuff, which is very famous. And part of it is how you have empathy for the other person, and arriving to know sooner rather than later, because no means different things for different people. And no doesn't necessarily mean no stop. It could be no, maybe, no, almost. And it has something to do with it's called never split the difference. Never. It's a fantastic book to get people to think a little bit about. And you can negotiate. I have clients who I make them read it, and they negotiate with their bills and their tabs and with the cable guy, and they use these techniques. But that's a fantastic book. So those two are ones that I always kind of refer back to. And then part of like your last question of things that we didn't talk about is if I'm a coach, and coaches have coaches, and therapists have therapists, right? And the plumber's house is the worst plumbed house in the neighborhood, so he has a plumber. For anybody out there who listens to this or watches this, I always tell all of my clients, find your cheerleaders who are there to support you. And your cheerleaders may be paid help. It may be outsourced help. It may be a team. And it may or may not be your friends and family. It might be, but it may or may not, it might not be. And find those people who you can be authentic with, be vulnerable with, but who are going to help guide you to whatever your life plan is. So if you're stuck and you're not having your job, find somebody who can help you talk to that process. If you are trying to start your business and you're struggling with the loss of income from a normal job and the investment into this project, find somebody and talk to them. I think we've realized during COVID that in the quarantines, and I think in Canada, you're on your 4th quarantine in some of your provinces, but the mental health part of human interaction, I think we've all realized, and I hope we all appreciate, that we need more investment and more honesty in mental health for everybody, right? Not just people who are clinically, diagnosed, but everybody, from the lonely perspective, being lonely or working by yourself or being at home or being stuck with your partner who you realize you don't want to be with anymore during the time of COVID, and find help, right? And ask for help. And you can go visit me at themorninggoals.com. I'll talk to you. I'm a nice guy. Or reach out to Levi. He seems like a nice guy. And, find your cheerleaders.
Yeah. Find the place where you're going to have meaningful conversations is what I keep coming back to. Like your conversations need to have meaning. I have some friends I went to high school with, grew up with, and like when I go back to that area, the conversations never have substance. Right. They're always about weather. They're always about sports. They're always about drink. They're always about the neighbors.
Right.
So important for me is, where am I having the meaningful conversations?
Right.
If I'm answering when they say, how are you doing? And I'm saying busy or good, then I need to find somewhere I can say something different.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think I'll call that to a close. It's one of those things, a good conversation you never want to end, but there's those people out there who like to keep to a schedule. So I'm going to do my best. I look forward to connecting again in the future. And I know that the people here listening to us are definitely going to have some follow-up questions.
Beautiful.
So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's been an honor. Thank you guys for having me. Go out, find your cheerleaders, and have a blessed day.